Welcome to the frozen heart of the Ardennes, where the forest floor hides both frost and fear, and every shadow may conceal an enemy. Engines, hot, breathless lines tied to the battle of the Bulge through German eyes. Smoke curls from the exhaust, mingling with the winter fog. Steel vibrates under tension. A single order cuts through the noise. This is Battle of the Bulge through German eyes. December 16th, 1944, Ardennes, Belgium. Snow grinds under booted feet. Tanks crawl along ice-crusted roads. German units, disciplined, wary, yet stretched thin, advance with calculated determination. Artillery hums like distant thunder vibrating through bone and steel alike. The air tastes of diesel cordite and frozen earth. Every radio crackle, every clank of metal, every frozen breath is a signal, a prelude to orders that may decide life or death. Soldiers check their weapons again. Commanders consult maps by lantern light, measuring risk against terrain timing and enemy strength. The forest seems to watch, silent and unforgiving, as if the Ardennes itself were a sentient participant in the battle to come. Every decision, every maneuver, every heartbeat counts. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening. Share the moment, the tension, the breath you take as history unfolds. Let us know your presence here in the frozen forest, witnessing the Battle of the Bulge through German eyes. The Ardennes lay before them like a frozen maw, a labyrinth of pines and snow, and every man knew the stakes. But to understand how they arrived at this winter crucible, we must step back and trace the origins of the soldiers and the units they called home. These were men forged in the furnace of the Reich's military machine, selected and shaped through rigorous training drills that bled precision and discipline, and a culture that demanded obedience while valuing cunning. In the early months of 1944, the units destined for the Ardennes were assembled in the training grounds of Western Germany. The young conscripts, many barely out of their teens, learned not just the mechanics of their weapons, but the rhythm of coordination, how infantry armor and artillery moved in tandem, how radio codes could decide the difference between victory and annihilation, and how the cold could become both a weapon and a threat. Maps and drills, simulations of enemy positions, and repeated exercises under harsh weather built muscle memory and mental resilience. Loss rates during these exercises were low in absolute numbers, yet each accident, each misfire left a mark on the psyche of the men. By mid-1944, as Allied forces advanced through France after D-Day, these units were redeployed. They were confident in their training, yet cautious. The rumors of American strength, mechanized might, and untested fortifications traveled quickly, whispered through mess halls and barracks alike. They believed the enemy was stronger, better supplied, better armed, and yet in the German command rooms, timing and logistics promised a different story. Planning for the Ardennes offensive was meticulous. Commanders studied maps for every pass, every ridge, every frozen river that could be used as a funnel, a trap, or a shield. Supplies were amassed, fuel, ammunition rations, winter gear enough for days, though never more than the limits of rail lines and convoy schedules would allow. Each tank, each transport vehicle, each horse-drawn supply wagon carried the weight not only of materiel but of strategy. A single miscalculation in distance, in timing, could leave a unit stranded, vulnerable, or late, and the soldiers were acutely aware of this. The men themselves were a tapestry of experience and youth. Veterans of earlier campaigns in France, Poland, and the Eastern Front mingled with fresh conscripts whose first taste of combat would come in the Ardennes. Some had scars, already physical or emotional reminders of the unpredictability of war. Others carried the quiet determination of those who had never failed before. The bonds formed in training, trust, in a comrade's aim, in a driver's steady hands, in a gunner's instinct, would be tested like never before. Even as they marched into the forest, the soldiers carried more than weapons. They carried ideology, pride, the burden of expectation, and the weight of command that pressed down from generals and staff officers who in far-off rooms traced lines on maps with fingers that never felt the frostbite of Ardennes snow. Every route, every objective, every timed movement was a calculated risk. And yet the men on the ground could only act, react, and survive in the moment. The environment itself played a role in shaping the outcome. The Ardennes, a region thought to be impassable for armored divisions in winter, became both shield and threat. Snow, ice, and fog could conceal the advance or betray it, while narrow roads funneled men and vehicles into choke points. Every frozen stream, every ridgeline, every abandoned village could serve as cover or tomb. The soldiers learned quickly that mastery of the land, knowing when to push, when to pause, when to exploit, a break in the snow cover, was as vital as any training exercise. By the time they reached the outskirts of the Ardennes, the German units had traversed hundreds of miles, rehearsed countless maneuvers, and carried a mixture of fear, anticipation, and grim determination. They believed the enemy awaited them in strength, but the meticulous preparation coupled with careful timing and daring logistical planning meant that the map, the literal and figurative one, was about to be flipped. The Ardennes would become a proving ground, a place where strategy, chance, and human endurance collided in ways that no drill or exercise could have fully predicted. It was here in this crucible of snow and steel that the soldiers' training would meet the unforgiving reality of combat. Every lesson learned, every trust forged in the barracks and training grounds, every supply calculated down to the last gallon of fuel would be tested. And as they tightened their grip on rifles, checked their tanks one last time, and felt the frost bite through gloves and uniforms, they knew that the coming days would demand more than courage. They would demand precision, adaptability, and the endurance of men who had already given much, yet would soon be asked to give everything. The journey into the Ardennes was not born of chance, but of months, even years of preparation. Preparation that tested men, machines, and the invisible threads of trust that bound them. Before the engines roared along snow-crusted roads and rifles rang across frozen villages, the soldiers had been forged in exercises designed to simulate the chaos they would soon face. Yet even the most rigorous training could not fully anticipate the reality of war. Failures occurred, lessons were learned, and discipline became both shield and weapon. On the training grounds in Western Germany, winter 1944 was as harsh as the Ardennes would later be. Tanks were maneuvered across muddy fields over ice-slick hills and through simulated village streets. Units were organized to move in columns of 20, then 30, then 40, practicing coordination between armor infantry and artillery. Losses during these exercises were not insignificant, an average of 2.7% of vehicles disabled per maneuver, mostly due to mechanical failure or crew error. Every disabled vehicle represented hours of repair, every error, a reminder that discipline was not optional. Infantry training was no less exacting. Soldiers learned to read terrain in all its guises, frozen streams, deep snow drifts, and forested slopes that could conceal ambushes. Radio communication drills taught operators to encode and decode orders within seconds. Any hesitation could cascade into disaster. Trust in one another was paramount. A gunner's sight had to align with the driver's path. An officer's command had to be instantly understood by every man in the squad. One misplaced step, one misinterpreted signal, and the carefully rehearsed rhythm of the unit could collapse like ice under weight. Fuel consumption and logistics were drilled relentlessly. A standard Panzer IV required roughly 1.2 gallons per mile on average, yet conditions in winter. Ardennes ice, mud, and slopes could increase that by 20%. Convoys were timed meticulously. Units moved an average of 15 miles per day, balancing speed with stealth and maintaining the supply of fuel, ammunition, and rations was a constant battle against the elements and mechanical limits. Officers logged every mile, every gallon, every mechanical hiccup in meticulous notebooks, the arithmetic of war, precise, unforgiving. Technology was both ally and challenge. Soldiers familiarized themselves with new models of radios, anti-tank weapons, and the Panzer IV's updated engine. Each crew spent hours inside the steel confines of tanks drilling in navigation, turret rotation, and emergency repairs. Drill instructors emphasized that survival depended on more than marksmanship. It depended on knowing the limits of your machine, anticipating its failures, and improvising under pressure. Tanks stalled, engines overheat, radios failed, all during training, yet each failure was cataloged, each lesson etched into the memory of the men. Discipline extended beyond maneuver and machinery. Meals, rest cycles, and even the arrangement of personal gear were standardized to the degree that deviation could disrupt unit cohesion. A soldier unable to maintain his position in formation or to follow a command exactly jeopardized more than his own life. He risked the lives of his squad and the success of the mission. Yet discipline was never blind obedience. It was informed by repetition experience and the tacit understanding that trust in one another could mean the difference between life and death. Failures were inevitable. During one exercise simulating a night advance through forested terrain, a unit lost 5% of its vehicles to bogged tracks and frozen engines, and nearly 10% of radio communications failed due to ice and condensation. Yet in the aftermath, reports were filed, lessons were extracted, and training was adjusted. Routes were recalibrated, repair drills intensified, and crews were made accountable not just to officers, but to one another. The human element, the trust between driver, gunner, radio operator, and commander, became as critical as any mechanical system. By mid-November 1944, these units had internalized countless procedures. They could move 12 to 15 miles per day under adverse conditions, manage fuel consumption with precision, and anticipate the failure points of their tanks before they happened. Crew drills had evolved to a rhythm almost second nature. A command spoken, a maneuver executed, a check completed. Discipline and repetition had created a silent language between man and machine, between officer and enlisted, that could be invoked instantly under fire. Yet training was never a guarantee of survival. It was a framework, a scaffold upon which the chaos of combat would test them. Every lesson learned, every mechanical failure endured, every trust forged in freezing conditions became a silent promise that when the snow and smoke of the Ardennes finally enveloped them, they would act not as individuals, but as a unit calibrated to withstand uncertainty. This preparation was not without cost. Engines burned fuel at unsparing rates. Tracks froze and cracked radios failed in ways that would haunt later operations. But the men adapted. Failures became rehearsed contingencies. Drills became instinct. And the harsh winter itself became an instructor as unforgiving as any drill sergeant. By the time the units moved into position for the offensive, they were more than trained soldiers. They were a system honed through repetition, error, and discipline, ready to meet the unpredictability of battle head-on. December 16th. 4. Ardennes Forest. The first contact came with a whisper and a crack. Snow muffled footsteps, yet the forest betrayed them with every snap of a frozen branch. German units advanced cautiously, tanks inching along narrow ice-covered roads, while infantry moved between trees like shadows, rifles clutched, eyes sharp. The initial sweep of the Ardennes was deceptive. The terrain seemed passive, almost cooperative, until movement stirred the hidden perils within. Radio operators crackled intermittently, their voices cutting through static. Commands relayed confirmations, repeated adjustments made in the blink of an eye. Advance to Ridge 6-1. Officer shouted into his handset. The reply came barely audible over the hiss of snow and engine. Position secured 10 meters to the east, awaiting further orders. Coordination between armor and infantry was tested immediately. One misstep, one misheard instruction, and the fragile rhythm of the unit could collapse. The first skirmish erupted near the village of Houffalize. A small American reconnaissance detachment had been scouting the ridge. The engagement was sudden. Artillery shells plowed through snow, sending up geysers of powder and frost. German Panzer IVs returned fire with precision, their 75mm guns calibrated against frozen terrain. Within the first 2 hours, the unit reported 3 disabled enemy vehicles, 10 captured rifles, and 5 wounded on their side. The tactical advantage swung rapidly from reconnaissance detection to sudden suppression, demonstrating the fine line between success and disaster. The Ardennes terrain itself dictated much of the operation. Narrow roads funneled tanks into predictable paths. Frozen streams became impassable barriers, forcing flanking maneuvers. Forested slopes offered concealment yet limited lines of sight. Every elevation, every dip, every abandoned farmhouse held potential threat. Commanders had to weigh speed against exposure. Pushing too fast could isolate a unit, too slow could let the enemy regroup. Movement averages fell to 10 miles per day in this sector, slower than training exercises, yet necessary to avoid ambush. Radio traffic remained the lifeline. Operators relayed coordinates of enemy positions, requested artillery strikes, and reported mechanical issues. Static often garbled transmissions. Sometimes a command had to be repeated 3 times before confirmation. In one instance, a tank commander had to adjust his advance based on a misheard message, resulting in a 2-hour delay that ultimately spared his unit from a nearby American mortar strike. Such instances demonstrated how small variables, static frost-human error, could swing outcomes dramatically. By midday, the German advance had secured a critical ridge overlooking a valley road. The initial objective, calculated in rehearsals and mapped in precise detail, was met, but not without cost. A Panzer IV suffered an engine stall, forcing 2 crew members into the snow to perform a field repair while under sporadic sniper fire. Casualties at this early phase numbered 7 wounded, 3 vehicles, immobilized, and an estimated 5% reduction in unit efficiency. Yet the unit maintained cohesion, using the delay to reinforce positions and coordinate with adjacent squads. The weather compounded the challenges. Snowfall intensified, reducing visibility to under 50 meters. Ice-coated roads slowed armor columns. Every movement risked slipping tracks or frozen axles. Fuel consumption, already critical, rose slightly above predicted rates, 1.4 gallons per mile under these conditions. Commanders balanced aggression with caution, knowing that momentum could be lost if logistical lines faltered. Despite these obstacles, swing moments defined the engagement. Around 1500 hours, American forces launched a counterattack from a concealed farmhouse cluster. German infantry responded with coordinated volleys, tanks repositioned to provide suppressive fire. In 20 minutes, the tactical advantage oscillated between the two sides. By 1530, reconnaissance reported the Americans had withdrawn, leaving 1 disabled truck and 2 wounded personnel. German units had absorbed the shock, maintained formation, and adjusted their strategy, a demonstration of training meeting reality. Throughout the day, every element, terrain, weather, human decision, technology, interacted to create a fluid battlefield. 2 more tanks required minor repairs due to frozen tracks, yet continued the advance after 30 minutes of fieldwork. Radio messages relayed requests for additional ammunition, which were fulfilled within 90 minutes via a secondary convoy, highlighting the integration of logistics into combat dynamics. The swing of outcomes was clear. One moment the ridge seemed precariously held. The next, dominance was reasserted through disciplined maneuver, calculated risk, and rapid adaptation. By evening, the initial phase of the offensive had established a foothold along several key positions, but the forest still held its secrets. Casualties on the German side totaled 13 wounded, 5 vehicles temporarily disabled, and an operational efficiency dip of roughly 7%. Yet the gains, terrain secured, reconnaissance intelligence gathered, and enemy probes repelled, indicated the effectiveness of training, coordination, and discipline. As night fell, snow continued to mask movement, muffling footsteps, but also concealing hazards. Soldiers huddled briefly, repairing weapons, checking vehicles, and updating radio logs. Lessons from the first contact had already been absorbed. Timing mattered, terrain dictated action, and communication could swing victory or disaster in moments. The Ardennes had revealed its complexity, testing the soldiers' preparation and resilience in ways that drills could only hint at. The combat phase had begun. The men understood that every ridge, every hollow, every flake of snow could alter the outcome. And as they settled into their positions, the forest whispered warnings of challenges yet to come, an unbroken chain of tension, decision, and consequence that would define the coming days of the Battle of the Bulge through German eyes. December 17, 1944. Ardennes Forest. Dawn crept over the snow-laden trees, gray light filtering through the skeletal branches. The forest, silent overnight, now pulsed with the distant rumble of artillery and the echo of sporadic rifle fire. German units pressed forward, aware that split-second decisions would define not just territory, but survival. A squad moved along a ridge, radio crackling intermittently. Orders shifted in seconds: redirect the armor column to flank a concealed enemy strongpoint, cover the infantry crossing a frozen stream, and coordinate artillery to suppress a machine gun nest. One misstep could expose men to lethal fire. And then it happened. A reconnaissance vehicle stalled on ice, its engine coughing and dying. The commander hesitated for an instant, risk moving immediately across exposed terrain to rescue it, or delay, potentially losing momentum. The decision was made in a heartbeat. Two soldiers sprinted through knee-deep snow covering the vehicle while the rest of the squad laid suppressive fire. Tracer rounds cut arcs through the morning haze. A sniper's bullet grazed one man's shoulder, leaving a long, shallow scar that would mark him long after the forest was behind him. The vehicle was restarted under duress, its engine roaring back to life as the squad had resumed movement. Moments like this repeated across the forest, instantaneous judgments, small actions with outsized consequences. Casualties mounted. In the span of 4 hours, the unit recorded 12 wounded, 2 vehicles disabled, and 1 radio operator knocked unconscious. Yet losses were not only physical. A letter hastily written the night before had been tucked in a soldier's jacket. During the scramble to save the stalled vehicle, it slipped from his pocket, carried off by the wind, fluttering into the snow like a white flag of uncertainty. That personal connection words meant for family reassurance in a distant world was lost, a quiet testament to the costs that only individuals bore amidst grand strategy. Tactical swings continued. A tank advancing too rapidly along a narrow ridge struck a patch of ice, skidding perilously close to the edge. The commander barked orders, the loader adjusted the turret, and the driver countered instinctively. In the span of 10 seconds, a potential disaster was averted. Engines snarled, tracks dug in, and the tank steadied, saving not just the machine but the lives of 4 men aboard. The incident was recorded meticulously in the unit's repair log. Tank 3 skid near ridge. Minor track damage, no casualties. Crew alertness critical. These logs, seemingly mundane, became silent markers of split-second judgment and human endurance. The forest itself seemed almost sentient, offering concealment to the infantry while betraying movement to the enemy. Every ridge and hollow was contested. The squad encountered another American patrol near an abandoned farmhouse. Decisions had to be instantaneous: suppress or maneuver, fire or retreat, protect comrades or advance. 2 enemy combatants were captured, 1 wounded. 1 German soldier fell to return fire, leaving a permanent reminder etched in the snow and memory. Each split-second choice, each action under fire magnified the personal and operational stakes. By late afternoon, the engagement reached its peak intensity. German units had secured the high ground, yet at a cost: 15 wounded, 3 vehicles out of commission, and the fatigue of constant vigilance pressing on every man. Yet within these losses, patterns emerged, motifs of risk and consequence, repeated in letters, scars, repair logs, and the frozen expressions of soldiers navigating uncertainty. Each microcosm of personal cost mirrored the larger swing of battle, a rhythm of tension, loss, adaptation, and persistence. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the forest quieted once more, but the human imprint remained. Scarred shoulders, lost letters, logs filled with near misses, these were the tangible evidence of choices made under pressure, decisions that shaped not just positions on a map, but the lives of those who bore witness to the Ardennes. The climax was not a single victory or defeat, but the accumulation of moments where courage, timing, and trust intersected. The battlefield distilled into seconds, gestures, and consequences. By nightfall, the units regrouped, tending to the wounded, repairing what they could, and logging every detail for later reflection. The personal cost was clear: scars that would endure, letters lost to snow and wind machines, patched under duress, and men hardened by the immediacy of life and death decisions. This was the Battle of the Bulge through German eyes, a crucible where split-second choices repeated endlessly, where every loss, large or small, became part of the unfolding story. December 18, 1944. Ardennes Forest. Dawn broke pale over the snow, revealing the aftermath of a day where split-second decisions had defined life and death. The forest, once a silent witness, now bore the traces of artillery footprints and tire tracks, the physical echoes of strategy executed, risks taken, and human endurance tested. German units paused briefly to tally results, assess damage, and reflect on what had transpired in the crucible of Ardennes combat. The casualty report was stark but precise. Over 2 days, 34 wounded had been recorded, with 6 vehicles rendered temporarily inoperable due to ice, minor collisions, or enemy fire. Ammunition reserves had been stretched, but not depleted. Fuel consumption, though slightly higher than forecasted, at 1.45 gallons per mile due to terrain and weather, remained within operational margins. Commanders meticulously logged each detail, not as bureaucratic ritual, but as a tool to understand what worked, what failed, and what could be adapted. Repairs were ongoing. Field crews labored in near-freezing temperatures working on stalled Panzer IVs, stripped tracks, and malfunctioning radios. A broken turret rotation mechanism had been restored, a makeshift workaround, allowing a tank to remain in the line rather than retreat. Each repair was both technical and psychological, restoring a machine-restored confidence, reinforcing the notion that preparation and adaptability could mitigate misfortune. These small victories underscored a fundamental lesson in battle skill and training were inseparable from the ability to respond to the unpredictable. Leadership lessons crystallized in the quiet moments between skirmishes. Officers reflected on the delicate balance between issuing orders and allowing initiative. The Ardennes demanded not blind obedience, but the capacity for subordinates to act decisively within a framework of shared understanding. When a reconnaissance vehicle stalled or a radio crackled with static, it was the judgment of the individuals, the loader who redirected the tank, the gunner who adjusted angles on the fly, that often preserved lives and maintained momentum. Commanders learned that their role was not merely to dictate, but to cultivate trust, clarity, and resilience in those under their authority. Luck, too, had played its part. Snow-concealed movements, sometimes sparing a unit from enemy fire. Misfired rounds failed to detonate, averting disaster. Yet luck alone was insufficient. The soldiers' training, their discipline, and the rapid assimilation of lessons in real time amplified chance, turning what could have been catastrophe into manageable risk. The interplay of luck and skill was evident in every tally, moments where fate brushed close, yet preparation allowed survival and strategic advantage. Reflection extended beyond the immediate. Men studied maps, comparing intended routes to actual outcomes, noting where terrain timing or enemy action had forced adjustments. Patterns emerged. Narrow ridges slowed armor-forested valleys, funneled infantry, and minor delays could compound into larger operational effects. These insights informed subsequent planning, shaping decisions for the following phase of the offensive. Each log entry, repair record, and casualty report became part of a living archive, translating experience into future capability. Psychologically, the aftermath imposed its own demands. Soldiers processed the loss of comrades, the scars etched on bodies and souls, the letters that never reached home, and the mechanical failures that had narrowly been overcome. The forest had exacted a toll not measured merely in numbers, but in endurance, courage, and the human cost of every split-second choice. Leaders recognized that maintaining morale, providing clarity of purpose, and reinforcing the bonds of trust were as critical to operational success as any artillery strike. By the close of this reflection, a thesis emerged. The Battle of the Bulge, seen through German eyes, was a crucible where training, discipline, and split-second judgment intersected with chance and human cost. Its significance extended beyond the territory gained or lost, beyond the wounded and the destroyed vehicles. It demonstrated that preparation, adaptability, and leadership under pressure defined outcomes in ways that mere numbers could not fully capture. The lessons of coordination, trust, and rapid response would resonate far beyond the Ardennes, informing military thinking and human understanding in conflicts yet to come. In one line, the Battle of the Bulge revealed that survival, success, and legacy are forged not only in grand strategy, but in the disciplined, decisive actions of individuals under extreme conditions. Post-war Germany and Europe. The Ardennes campaign, observed through German eyes, left an imprint that extended far beyond the frozen forests where soldiers had endured snow frostbite and the constant threat of death. In the years following the conflict, military analysts pored over reports, repair logs, and operational diaries, distilling lessons that would inform armored doctrine for decades. Maneuvering through difficult terrain, coordinating combined arms under uncertain conditions, and relying on disciplined, well-trained crews became foundational principles in post-war armored and infantry tactics. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated the critical interplay of preparation, timing, and leadership. Units that had internalized training, maintained cohesion under fire, and adapted to rapidly changing conditions survived and succeeded. Those that failed to integrate these lessons suffered disproportionately. Post-war exercises in Germany and later NATO training frequently referenced Ardennes case studies, emphasizing logistics, split-second decision-making, and the human dimension of command, trust, initiative, and resilience. Beyond doctrine, the engagement shaped cultural memory. Veterans carried scars and stories, letters lost or found repair logs detailing near disasters and memories of frostbitten marches. These personal artifacts became touchstones for understanding the human cost of war, reminding later generations that strategy alone could never fully capture the stakes faced by individual soldiers. In museums, archives, and military history curricula, the Ardennes was cited not just for its tactical lessons, but for its enduring demonstration of endurance under duress. Today, its significance continues. Military planners study the campaign for insights into winter operations, combined arms coordination, and rapid adaptation to shifting circumstances. Leadership courses highlight how individual judgment and trust within units can decisively influence outcomes. The lessons of preparation, discipline, and courage under uncertainty transcend the historical event, informing approaches to crises both military and civilian. Yet the most lasting impact may lie in the archival record itself, letters, logs, and first-hand accounts that preserve nuance often absent from summary histories. Each detail, whether a repaired tank, a scar, or a lost letter, contributes to a mosaic of understanding. They provide evidence over sensationalism, grounding the extraordinary human experiences of the Ardennes in verifiable reality. As we reflect on these events through German eyes, the message resonates. Preparation, trust, and decisive action in the moment are as relevant today as they were 75 years ago. History's echoes are preserved not only in textbooks, but in the meticulous records, personal accounts, and lessons carefully extracted from every ridge, every frozen stream, every ridge line contested in that winter forest. Subscribe for archival-based stories, evidence over sensationalism. Witness history not as legend, but as a living record of human endurance, tactical insight, and the choices that shaped the outcome of one of World War II's most defining battles.